on PowerTalk AM 1460 and FM 101.1. Streaming worldwide on iHeartRadio. Jan Price talks to the movers and shakers in the film business. The Jan Price Show.
You're listening to The Jan Price Show, and today my guest is director Richard Gray, and we're talking about his latest film, Robert the Bruce, which I absolutely loved. Loved everything about this film. So welcome to the show, Richard. I'm very excited to talk to you about this movie. How are you doing today?
Too. I'm doing great. How are you?
Great. Absolutely great. You surviving being in quarantine?
A little bit. The homeschooling is, I just found out I'm not up to scratch with grade 2 geometry. But other than that, I'm learning. I'm learning all the time.
You're learning the same way.
Yeah.
Good. See, that's good. So you're learning things you've forgotten about. So that's all good. Well, first of all, I want to say I thought this movie was just stunningly beautiful. The cinematography is spectacular, and like the sadness for me was, because I believe all movies should be seen in the movie theater. The sadness for me was that this isn't going to be seen in a movie theater, unfortunately. So, I mean, are there any plans maybe later to re-release it or something?
It's been bittersweet because we got to premiere the film at Edinburgh Film Festival last year, and then we traveled the film throughout Scotland and the UK, and it was amazing to have it there on the big screen because, as you mentioned, it really was shot for the big screen. And we're planning on having 600 screens actually starting on the 16th of April, and then 20 city rollout starting on yesterday on the 24th. But it hasn't worked out with this virus. However, the positive thing is we're told that a lot more people are watching a lot more content at home, and so maybe this is a way that a lot more people can get to see the film because we won't be lost with other blockbusters at the cinema. So if it leads to more people seeing the film, then that's ultimately a good thing. And we're definitely planning on some theatrical events later in the year. We're actually going to be working alongside Braveheart on their 25th anniversary, but that fell through as well with the virus. So anyway, we're happy it can be on every platform. It's on every platform now. And so that's a positive.
That is a positive. That's the one thing. And I agree with you that a lot more people will be finding the film right now because everybody's looking for more content to watch while we're all being quarantined, and they keep extending the time that we will be quarantined. So it will be good that people can see it, and many people have these big, huge, home screens at home anyhow. So it will be beautiful on those big home screens. It is interesting that this is coming out at the same time as the 25th anniversary of Braveheart because it is a wonderful companion piece, and I would definitely recommend people watching maybe Braveheart first and then watching this because it's a beautiful companion piece to that. And you have Angus Macfadyen, who played the same character in Braveheart as he's playing in this film.
Robert the Bruce.
Yes, Robert the Bruce. So just so our listeners know, do you want to give us the plot line of the film so they know what we're talking about here?
Yeah, so if you use Braveheart as a reference, which is good because so many people saw the film, it's hard to believe it was 25 years ago. It makes us all feel old. But of course, at the end of the film, after William Wallace died, you see Robert the Bruce riding off to war at Bannockburn. But what the film didn't cover was there was a long distance in between William Wallace's death and the Bannockburn battle that Robert the Bruce won and won Scotland its freedom. So what we concentrate on, he actually lost war after war after war with the English after Wallace's death, to the point where Scott didn't even necessarily believe in him anymore, and he was seen as a bit of a loser king. And that's what made this story so special, because it was something that I hadn't researched and studied before, and it was kind of lovely because the story is about the orphans and the widow that kind of saved the King of Scotland and sheltered him through one of these awful times when he was on the run. And it was that side of the story that made us think, well, we can do this, because, I was scared to read the script, which Angus worked on for over 10 years, because you're wondering, what is this going to be like and how could it possibly live up to Braveheart? But it's such a different story and an original piece that we were so excited by it. We knew we could jump into it.
So it is a true story.
Well, it's based on a true story. The history of that time is very hard to research, particularly when a lot of the history books are written by the English at the time. And he was, of course, an outlaw. But what we do know is that he was on the run for a long, long time, and that other Scottish clans were actually hunting him down and were siding with the English at the time. So we know that he took shelter, and we know that he was injured. And so our story takes place over a winter when he's sheltered by a family who eventually smuggle him, or attempt to smuggle him, up to his northern army. And we know back in the day that is the sort of thing that would happen. So that was where the story came from.
I love the way you start this film with Anna Hutchinson. Is that Hutchinson?
Yeah.
Being the narrator and telling the story to her children. And again, the lighting, the cinematography, everything about this film is just stunningly beautiful. And the way that it's a big film, but yet it's very intimate at the same time, where you have these relationships that take place that were unlikely relationships.
That's exactly right. And so it's hard for a family, because you're talking about, in Anna's role, a widow who lost her husband to one of his losing battles, and 3 orphan children that lost their fathers to his losing battles, and to keep faith with him and to support him when they could have given him up for a reward is what makes the story tick. Because, of course, back then the king was something that was meant to come from God. And once Robert lost the faith that he was that chosen one, it sent him into a spiral. But it's this family's conviction and their sacrifice that gives him the confidence to try one more time, which is, it's great to see a war film or a historical drama film told through the eyes of characters who don't usually get a mention, I think.
Exactly. And that it gave him the strength, as you say, too, to go back. I mean, literally, physically the strength, because this wonderful woman helps heal him back to health physically as well as emotionally, because he was spent. He was ready to give up and not wanting to do this anymore. He didn't want any more people to die. I think
that's right.
So all these people continuing to die for him and his cause, or their cause too, obviously. That he became renewed by them and their experience, and gave him the strength and the energy to go on. And so that shift, that internal shift that takes place, that is so beautiful, because so many times I think a lot of people are probably feeling that right now in life, with everything that's going on with the quarantine, that they feel beaten and lost and ready to give up. And it's that one little sparkle of a light, like a candle, one candle that lights you up again and makes you persevere and go forward. So it's got a beautiful metaphor and beautiful story for today as well as for back then.
I agree. And the spider, the story of the spider is on a biblical level for Scottish people. And Scottish kids grew up hearing the story of Robert the Bruce, who was injured and beaten and was in a cave and was hiding in a cave and was ready to give up. But he watched the spider in these really awful conditions continue to try again to make this giant, beautiful web. And the story goes that was his inspiration to leave the cave and try again. And that's when he met the family in our story. So it's a big story of hope and sacrifice, because of course Morag, sacrifices everything, but she knows it's for the good of the country, which is some kind of sacrifice.
Yes, exactly. And all what she had to do and her children and everything. It's really beautifully done. So I was now. How was that real snow? That wasn't CGI snow.
Oh God, it was so cold, and I'm Australian, and so I had thankfully made a film in Alaska during the winter before, so I was a little bit prepared for it.
You
because people, I don't. Yeah, my crew keeps saying my crew keeps. When I call my crew now, they say, "What time of year?" That's the first thing they ask me. Because I sold them to this on, we're going to Scotland and we're going to Montana, it'd be great. They're like, what time of year? and so it was usually about 9 degrees and freezing. And so what that brought to the film was beautiful, because, it was between, 5 and 25 was average kind of temperature.
God.
But it added so much to the film because when we talk about the sacrifice in the family and the peasant family living in this croft, you got to see what it would have been like. It also made the story make sense because you would understand why somebody could hide out on a farm like that, because certainly nobody's coming searching in those conditions. And so all that snow, we were really worried with the CG and continuity with the snow, but we didn't need to because it was just there with us the whole time. The vapor and breath coming out of actors' mouths as well is something that we often think about in visual effects, but something we didn't have to worry about. And we built all those sets. They weren't like film sets. They were built from stone, how they should be look historically, but of course that meant there are no windows, and the only heating source was coming from the fire within the croft. But what it led to was such an experience for the actors, because I think it was easy for them to get in character. It was so horrendously cold, but it was incredibly hard work for them and the crew, of course. And, I would get in the car with my DOP like 5 a.m., pitch black in the middle of winter, and we drive 45 minutes out to set behind the plow truck. And then we had to get to a point in the road where we had to chain up the vehicle, and we'd get down under our car using the iPhones as light as we're chaining up the car to get to set. And we would look at each other with the iPhones and say, screw you. Like, that was the first thing we'd say to each other every morning. And then we'd get to set, we'd get our coffee, and we'd slowly warm up and then start smiling again, and then we'd go for it.
Well, I was thinking, you could see, I thought, this is real snow. This isn't CGI snow. It's real snow. And you could see their noses were getting red, ears, cheeks.
Blue lips. Yep.
And I was like, oh my gosh. I said, I hope you didn't do a lot of takes.
No. And so it really was a learning experience, because the good thing about the weather was there wasn't very much daylight. So we knew we had to protect the actors and the crew. So we could never shoot long days, even if we wanted to. And the conditions that we're in, shooting nights wasn't an option for a lot of the locations. So the good thing was we became really efficient with the planning to really get in and out and get the actors in and out. But we learned a lot. But we learned to concentrate on story, and maybe the camera plan went out the door for a day, but because of the location and how beautiful it was really more about capturing what was best for the script.
Well, it is beautiful. Did you shoot those scenes in Montana? The winter scenes in Montana?
Yeah, combination, because we felt a little bit lucky and blessed throughout the shoot. We had a guy called Shorus Wallace, who's the descendant of William Wallace, and he was in Braveheart, and he's a historian for the time. And he was one of the first people we hired, because we knew we had to film in the US as well, Scotland. And so we would send photos back and forth for him, and then he was on set every day in the US. So he would kind of tell us, well, this kind of looks like Glencoe, and this could be Stirling, and this could be the Isle of Skye. And then because we knew we were shooting Scotland after the US shoot, we could adjust, we could watch all the dailies and then pick Scottish locations that tied in. The other good news was the UK was having its worst storm in 100 years, called the Beast from the East. And we kind of felt lucky about that, because we literally flew from Montana to a very snowy and hardcore Scotland, but it actually suited us really well. And so the snow scenes are both in Scotland and in Montana.
So you were fortunate that you...
It didn't feel fortunate on set. But in retrospect, it was, yeah.
It's very fortunate. Well, if the snow is fortunate, I love snow.
Yeah,
absolutely. I miss snow. If you're just tuning in, you're listening to the Jan Price Show, all about movies. And today, my guest is director Richard Gray, and we're talking about his latest film, Robert the Bruce, which is a companion piece to Braveheart. It's a beautiful movie. And Angus Macfadyen. So tell me, he was in Braveheart, playing Robert the Bruce in Braveheart. What made him decide that he wanted to write the rest of the story? And you said he worked on it for 10 years?
Yeah, so when he did a lot of research for Braveheart, and as we know, the ending of that film with Robert the Bruce charging off in Bannockburn, kind of continuing to carry the torch that he and James Douglas did after William Wallace's death, there was this huge part of the Robert the Bruce history that wasn't told in that film, and quite fascinating. And so he always wanted to tell more of that story. But his script changed from wanting to be a big action piece to wanting to be this much more personal story. And I think that was the ground that he needed to break through with writing it alongside co-writer Eric Dalgau. And I think once they found the story of the family and humanized people like James Douglas, who are known as just, Scotland's heroes. Once he found the human side and the hardship side of it and started concentrating on the loss of war, I think that's when he found a story that was more special.
Yes.
And I think that's what and Anna actually was working, who plays Morag, was working with Angus in the UK on another film. And that's how this came to be, because Angus was telling her about the script. And Anna said, well, Richie, my friend Richie, loves Braveheart. So you should get it. You should get it to him. And that's how it happened. But I was scared to read it, but pleasantly surprised it was such a different story.
I was going to ask you how you became involved in this film. So it was from your friend Anna Hutchinson.
Yeah.
That told you about the script. So why were you afraid to read it? What was it about the script?
Well, I was
afraid to read it?
Well, I was 15 when Braveheart came out, and I just started making short films. And Mel Gibson at the time in Australia was a god, like an absolute god. And so when you're a young filmmaker coming up, and it had to be an independent film, and we knew the budget we had to work with, I was scared that it wasn't going to be a story that would fit. The last thing you want to do is do some pale comparison or some weak version, but it was so completely not that. That's how we got excited. I remember seeing Braveheart in the cinema many times. And so when I met with Angus, I think it was in Culver City, I met with Angus for the first time with Anna. And I just finished reading the script for a second time. I was just so happy that it was something that we could all look at each other and go, oh, no, we can do this. And it was different. And that's what I think when we played the film in Scotland, I think that's what people really responded to, and hopefully here in the US as well now, because it's a side of things you don't usually get to see.
Exactly. And that's why I say it's a really good companion piece to Braveheart. It's a juxtaposition, in the sense it carries the story forward, but in a wholly different way. So you're not competing with Braveheart and trying to be a Braveheart, Braveheart 2, the sequel.
Exactly.
It's not the sequel.
No.
So at all. So for you, what was, I'm sure shooting in the cold and the snow and all of that was the most difficult thing, but what else was difficult about this film? How long did it take to shoot it?
5 shooting days in Montana, and then just over 2 weeks in Scotland. And we always shoot 5-day weeks. I know you know independent films so well, and often we get told to shoot 6-day weeks. But in my experience, it's never a rewarding experience for the crew or the cast, or for that matter, the final product, and particularly in these conditions. And so, you just can't work 6 days a week in 9 degrees and hope for a really great result. So we really try to put all the money on the screen and shoot for as long as we possibly can, because in these conditions, you need the time, because you might not be able to get to the location one day. And the last thing you want to do is start compromising because of time. So we had what I thought was a really healthy filming time, and we all lived together in the same hotel, and we rehearsed together, and the costume department was one ballroom, and the props department was another ballroom, and the stunt coordinating rehearsal place was another ballroom, and there was one restaurant and one bar at the hotel, and it was really such a fun, awesome experience. And what I've been doing for years is, particularly on indie films and indie budgets, is on the weekend we kind of have a family day where we invite family and friends and the crew and the cast to come watch the dailies. We have a few drinks and eat and watch the footage, but we don't watch boring ass 5 hours of uncut footage. We had an amazing editor on this, Haley, and she would put together just a 10-minute music video montage of the best stuff. And it's such a rewarding experience when you're busting your ass and you're freezing cold to sit down on a weekend with your friends and watch the footage and go, oh, okay, I see what we're doing here. And then you go into the next week kind of recharge, because you're thinking about the shot you might get up on the next weekend. And the hardest thing was horses, period costume, stunts, and sword fight sequences on ice and snow. That's something that I haven't done before. And that just took a lot of, it was very educational.
Sure.
But as was, getting the lenses not to fog up, and the camera department doing an amazing job of learning what it's like when you're bringing glass from, a 70-degree tent to 9 degrees outside. And so we really kind of all learned together about the conditions. But it was really, really rewarding.
Well, it sounds like, I love the camaraderie and the way that you described, how you film, because I think it's so important to recharge your batteries again, to get ready for the next week. And if you don't have these 2 days, to recharge, 1 day's not enough time.
Well, you just wash your clothes, and then the vast majority of people are hungover. So if you've got 1 day, that's the outcome. So if you've got 2 days, you can actually start getting into a creative mode again before you go back to work, and not just dreading going back to work. And it's so important.
Exactly. Well, I told you before we got on the air, before we started recording the show, that since we've been quarantined, everybody was telling me about Outlander. And actually, prior to being quarantined, I had a lot of people in the beginning of the year when I went down to the Santa Barbara Film Festival and then Sundance. And it was funny how many people were coming to me and go, "You've got to watch Outlander. You haven't seen Outlander?" So, when we became quarantined, I binged watched Outlander. And I think because it's been on Netflix, a lot more people have found it. And then I subscribed to Stars to see the rest of the, catch up with season 4 and 5 now. But you mentioned you're good friends with Sam Heughan and you wanted him to be in this film. What part did you want him to play?
I must preface this to say I'm not good friends, because I hate when you overemphasize. But I did make a film with Sam in LA, and he's an amazing guy. And I would say his friend. So it's a tiny little indie film that I'm not sure what they ended up calling it. I think it's called, you might have to edit this, although you don't edit your shows, do you? So there could be big troubles here. So it was an indie film in LA, and he was just such a pleasure to work with, and just so humble. And of course, they film a lot of Outlander in the UK, but the timing didn't quite work out. And it was the same with Daniel Portman, who was in the film, who's from Game of Thrones, and he was shooting the final couple of episodes of Game of Thrones, but was lucky enough to get a couple of weeks to come out and film with us. But Sam is such a humble, beautiful guy. We'd love to work together again in the future. And actually, we're planning on doing a James Douglas film, because, between William Wallace, Robert the Bruce, James Douglas is probably the third guy that's just as big in Scottish folklore and Scottish history who hasn't really had his own film. He actually was Robert the Bruce's best friend, and Robert the Bruce died, and he carried Robert the Bruce's heart into battle in the Crusades, where he died. And both his heart, James Douglas' body, was returned home and buried. So James Douglas definitely deserves a film as well. So maybe there'll be some, if this film, if all goes well, if you guys go out there and watch it, we might be able to do it again.
Well, I think it's very exciting. I think what's happened, as I started to say, because of, again, there's a big, huge fan base for Outlander. I mean, it's just amazing. I had no idea, so this is like a whole new world. But people are really interested in everything that has to do with Scotland right now.
Oh, yeah.
It's a good thing.
I think so. And they're so proud of it in Scotland, in the UK, and it's such a great and well-made show. And I love when shows like on those channels come to Netflix. We experienced the same thing with Hell on Wheels, because we're working on a Western right now, and not a lot of people I had thought had seen that show, Hell on Wheels, but then it went to Netflix, and I think there's 4 seasons, and suddenly you've got this new fan base. I think the same thing happened with Shameless, right? When Shameless finally came onto Netflix, and then people go back to Showtime to watch the new stuff, but at least you've got this new core audience, which is really exciting.
Well, I think a lot of us are all helping each other and saying, "Hey, what are you watching? What do you recommend?" And it's very interesting, because I am seeing things too that I had never seen before, and probably wouldn't have invested as much time in, but now I have the time, so it's really been kind of fascinating, and seeing some really interesting movies too that one hasn't seen. Well, I wish you much success with Robert the Bruce. Everybody, please, where can people find it?
That's the great news about the one great thing about this virus is every place that you get your movies, from iTunes to any VOD platform to Google Play to Amazon, you can find it anywhere. And we'd love to know what you think. And I think in the next couple of weeks, I'll let you know. We're going to do some Twitter live kind of watches with the actors.
Oh, great.
You know, with Emma and also Zach McGowan, who's fantastic. Angus, obviously, Anna. All the cast. We're going to do some live watches, which will be fun.
Oh, that would be fun. Please let me know, because I'll also tweet it for you.
Oh, I'd love that.
I'll get it out there. So, Richard, it's such a joy talking with you. I look forward to talking with you again on your next film.
Me too.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Have a great day and stay healthy. Stay safe.
You too.
If you have missed any of the Jan Price shows all about movies, you can hear all of the past shows on iHeart's podcast network. And if you have a smart TV, you can also listen to the shows on your television. Thank you for listening today.
On PowerTalk AM 1460 and FM 101.1, streaming worldwide on iHeartRadio. Jan Price talks to the movers and shakers in the film business. The Jan Price Show.